Kia ora koutou katoa. This morning I want to talk about a way of understanding faith and reading the Bible. And in my use of this text, first reading from the Hebrew Bible, 1 Samuel 8, verses 4 to 20, I'm going to be drawing on the work of the Reverend Dr. Sam Wells, who's a public theologian and vicar of St. Martin in the Fields in London. This way of reading and understanding faith is one that does not give answers, absolutes, or assurances. In a recent Guardian article, Lamora Ash, a journalist, describes her quest for Christian faith, her retreat on the Isle of Iona, and her experience of the numinous. At the end of the article, she says, "I still don't think I could tell you anything definitive and absolute about the Christian faith, nor my own relationship with it. But what a trip it's been. I haven't found any answers. I'll go on looking." How profoundly different this is to so many versions of Christianity and conversions, where simple answers, certainty about those answers, and a passionate desire that others accept those answers predominate. Let's turn to the 1 Samuel text. After Moses crossed the Red Sea and the Israelites wandered in the wilderness, Joshua led them into the promised land and defeated many of the peoples who lived there. Allegedly. What followed was the period of the Judges, where the 12 tribes settled the land and from time to time faced an external threat, whereupon God supposedly raised up a great leader known as a judge, whose strength or leadership or wisdom saved the people. This is the understanding you get when you read the Hebrew text. How much history that is? In today's reading from 1 Samuel, the elders come and say to Samuel, the last of the judges, "We can't go on like this. Raising up leaders is too fragile, and an hereditary system isn't working. We need a king." Samuel prays. He receives a fascinating answer from his God. In effect, the deity says, "Listen to these elders, don't refuse them, but make sure they know exactly what they're letting themselves in for." So that's what Samuel does. He says, "This is what a king will do. He'll take your sons to be warriors. He'll take your daughters to be housekeepers. He'll take your property for his entourage. He'll take 1/10 of your produce in tax. He'll take. Then Samuel reaches the climax of his warning. 5 words you'd expect to shake the elders to their bones. "You shall be his slaves." Everything in the mythic memory of Israel, leaving Egypt, crossing the Red Sea, being given the 10 Commandments, entering the Promised Land, every single thing has been about freedom, about being delivered from slavery. And now here are the elders of Israel proposing a course of action that will reverse that history and take the nation back into bondage. They'd escaped Pharaoh, and now they're creating a Pharaoh of their own. Samuel's saying, "You must be out of your mind." But the elders aren't deterred. They insist on a king. Why? Because they demand to be like other nations. And Samuel, in effect, responds, "That's the whole point. You're not supposed to be like other nations." But having exposed the real issue, Samuel doesn't insist on his own way. He's listened to the elders and warned them, as God instructed. Now he gives them their heads. He goes ahead and anoints Saul king. So this is a text that raises questions rather than offers answers. To use it to support monarchy or republicanism or any form of government misses the point. There are 5 guidelines to bear in mind when reading the Hebrew Bible. Firstly, it was written backwards. Israel found itself in exile in Babylon in the 6th century BCE. It wrote the majority of the Bible as it came to terms with its catastrophic loss of identity, shorn of land, king, and temple. So a story like today's reading is part of that backward glance, rooted in a corporate attempt to find meaning and purpose amidst disaster. Secondly, the central question of the Hebrew Bible asking, what went wrong? After high points in Abraham, Moses, and David, how did Israel so comprehensively fall from grace? It's not hard to see the debate over having a king as part of Israel's soul-searching about whether it was walking in God's ways or straying from them. Guideline 3. Somehow, God is still faithful to Israel, even in exile, and even through Israel's failures. 1 Samuel 8. In 1 Samuel 8, this God discourages, warns, sets out consequences, but finally lets Israel go its own way. Guideline 4. Every story in the Hebrew Bible is an argument. You can delineate most of the material in the Old Testament by which theory it's advocating about who God is, what Israel's called to be, and what went wrong. Lastly, Guideline 5. The Hebrew Bible, what we usually call the Old Testament, is a constant debate about all the unresolved issues in Israel's identity. Story and faith, worship, discernment, and hope. In this case, one reason why kingship isn't flatly ruled out is because kingship produces David, and David is the great king of which all Israel looks back to, even today. So while kingship is part of the problem, so they argue it can't have been all bad. Maybe. So the Hebrew Bible is not a linear, univocal story. It's an account of constant reappraisal, reevaluation, and reassessment. Constant questioning and questioning any answers. It wasn't written straight through from Genesis to Malachi. It's a collection of perspectives from different eras and a constant process of editing as each new compiler adds a new spin on events. It's not a simple account of a vengeful, judgmental God superseded by the loving God of the New Testament. It's a lively debate between God and humankind, and almost every view expressed in the New Testament can be found in some form in the Old. Today's passage isn't a straightforward eyewitness version of a conversation between Samuel and the elders about governing arrangements. It's a narrative in which we witness every guideline I've just outlined. Today's passage, like so many, is a profound wrestling with who God is, what God wants, how we respond, and what happens when we get it wrong. The story from 1 Samuel 8, a microcosm of the Old Testament as a whole, also offers us 6 questions for our time. If we have a decision to make, or looking for discernment in a relationship, in work, in an election, or as we face our mortality. Pondering these 6 questions may help. I'm going to imagine we're one of the elders bringing a proposal and Samuel's talking to us. His first question is, where are we coming from? Samuel tells us a story about our past. He's saying, have you forgotten who you are? Whose you are? In fact, what he's saying is we're embedded creatures located in narratives about freedom, worship, discovery, truth. What is our whakapapa? What stories shape us? Samuel's second question is, where are we going? Samuel outlines a story about our future. He describes a future that looks uncomfortably like one we've learned nothing from our past. He calls us to an honest reappraisal of what will happen if we pursue this course. The next 2 questions put the story in the context of the nature of God. Question 3. Who is God? Samuel's pointing out to the elders that their plan presupposes a distant, uninterested, dormant God. A very different God, say, from that of Jesus. In our second reading today, concerned about intimacy, suffering, and communities of hope. Every decision we make reveals who we believe God is. And that leads naturally to where Samuel's directing the conversation, which is how we to shape our life in the light of who we've discovered God is. Question 4. Given who God is, who are we? Has our faith transformed our identity? The last 2 questions narrow down to the specifics of the debate between Samuel and the elders. In the end, it revolves around 3 crucial words: like other nations. This is the epicenter of the argument. On the one hand, Israel is indeed like other nations. It must organize its life, maximize its resources, protect itself against threats of weather, internal strife, hostile neighbors, and establish appropriate leadership to oversee all these things. Yet on the other hand, Israel is different from other nations. It's been liberated by God to live in a covenant relationship by which God will give it flourishing life, and it will in return be a place and community of justice, love, and hope. As for Israel, so it is for us. So here are Samuel's last 2 questions. In which way are we like others and must simply face and respond to the realities everyone must address? And in which ways has God given us a unique vocation to be what only we can be, to sing a song that only we can sing? Let's ponder these 6 questions for a moment. Where are we coming from? Where are we going? Who is God? Given who God is, who are we? How are we like others? How are we living our unique vocation? These are the 6 questions that shape the Old Testament, and I would argue provide the context of the New Testament. These are the 6 questions that frame our life today, especially when we face a crossroads, personally, as a church, or as a nation. When we read the Hebrew Bible, we recall we're in good company. Israel had the same 6 questions we have. The Bible isn't a book of answers, absolutes, or assurances, but it does open us, if we let it, to a lifelong series of good, probing questions. To see our second reading, Luke 16:19-25, as a commentary on life and death, judgment and the existence of hell, not only misses the point, but is a deliberate obfuscation. Rather, when we bring these 6 questions to the text, this parable about the rich man and Lazarus at his gate, we come face to face with the widening gap between wealth and poverty in Aotearoa as well as other places in the world. We ask where this divide is leading us as a nation, as humanity. And what is our Christian church vision? And what, given the priorities of our God, our kōpapa way of being as Christians, what should be our response as communities of faith and hope? And how do we begin and continue to make a difference in this regard? Such questions and where they lead us are the basis of faith. And faith is not certainty. Blessings to you this week.